everyone, and welcome back to another round of Tuesday Night Legacy. Tonight we've got 8-cast Painter versus Burn for you. Let's go ahead and take it over to the deck breakdowns. On the left, we have Fred playing his 8-cast Painter list. Now, this deck is an already established archetype in Legacy based off of these two cards right here, the Thought Monitor and the Thought Cast. Thought Monitor actually being modeled after Thought Cast. The concept is that if you have enough artifacts in play, then both of these spells only cast 1 blue to cast, so you're drawing a bunch of cards for very efficient use of mana. And that is going to put you over the top of your opponent since you are gathering much more resources and being able to deploy more threats and do more things, be more responsive. More cards equals more advantage. The other cards that are helping you go over the top with this deck is the Psi Master Thopterus, which is giving you a Thopter every time you're casting an artifact, and with a ton of 0 mana spells like Lotus Petal, Mishra's Bauble, and Mox Opal, you're getting a ton of Thopters in the air that are going to be able to usually be unblocked. Emery, Lurker of the Lock, is able to pull back an artifact from your grave if you can untap with it. And then, of course, the Kappa Cannoneer is your mid to late game strategy, being able to grow every time that an artifact enters the battlefield under your control. And with that Ward 4, it's basically hexproof in this format, and it is actually unblockable if you have an artifact enter the battlefield that turn. So Kappa Cannoneer, unanswered, can sweep up the game inevitably, basically over 2 or 3 turns. This deck has a little bit of control aspect to it. Of course, it's running its 4 Force of Wills, but it also has 4 Chalice of the Void, which is going to be really important in this specific matchup as Mono Red runs a lot of 1-drop spells. Finally, Fred has a little bit of spice in this specific list because if you think you're just playing against 8-cast, you'd be wrong, as he has the 3 Painter Servant and the 2 Grindstone. So this is the Grindstone package. Painter Servant being able to turn all permanents and all cards in the entire game into one specific color, and then Grindstone milling the top cards of your library and then checking again to see if they're the same color and then doing it again if it does match that color. So you can win the game out of nowhere by say either having a Painter Servant or a Grindstone already in play and then casting this Transmute artifact to sacrifice one of your artifacts in play and get the other piece activating and just milling out the opponent. So when they go to draw, the game is over and you win. As far as the sideboard is concerned here, I think Fred's probably going to be bringing in at least a couple of these Force of Negations to deal with all of these non-creature spells that Levi is going to be casting. Maybe even some Drown in the Locks. I'm not entirely certain on that. But everything else, maybe the Aethersworn Canonist comes in as well. But I think he's going to be leaning a lot on this Chalice of the Void, trying to make sure that he shuts Levi out of the game from not being able to cast those 1-mana spells. And on the right, we have Levi playing Mono Red Burn. This is Red's first strategy and perhaps its most effective strategy. Count to 21 with 7 spells. I say that because this deck runs 20 1-drop spells that all deal 3 damage to target player, or in some way you can cast them for 1 mana. So things like Chain Lightning, Lava Spike, Lightning Bolt, and then Rift Bolt you can suspend for 1, and Skewer the Critics you can Spectacle. After dealing damage to your opponent, you can cast it for 1. The rest of this deck is basically effective creatures like Goblin Guide and Monastery Swiftspear that are able to attack with haste, get in damage early and consistently over turns. So you're really trying to win in like the first 3 or 4 turns of the game. And then the final creature is the Eidolon of the Great Revel, which is probably the best card in this deck for this format, arguably with Price of Progress, but we're talking about Eidolon right now. Eidolon dealing 2 damage to each player that casts a CMC spell 3 or less, and since that's most of the format, players, especially the blue players that are trying to cast things like Ponders and Preordains to kind of set up and sculpt their hand, are taking a lot of damage for these Eidolons being on the field. And if you have several of them in play, then it becomes pretty much unreasonable to even try and cast one of those spells to take 4 or even 6 damage with these guys down on the field. Finally, the big go-to is the Fire Blast. At the end of it all, you know, if you've dealt 16 damage to your opponent, then you can just sacrifice 2 mountains, and 4 more damage with the Fire Blast is going to secure you the game. The other very, very good card in Legacy for this deck is going to be Price of Progress, which punishes the non-basic lands. And since we're all running dual lands or specialty lands of some sort, very few basics in Legacy, this is going to deal 2 damage to each of those non-basics that each player controls. Now, this deck, of course, is running 17 mountains and a few Sunbaked Canyons. This particular list only has 1 Sunbaked Canyon, so it's almost never taking punishment from the Price of Progress. But say you're playing against one of those 4-color control decks, then you're going to be doing immense amount of damage. It could just win you the game for 2 mana. As far as sideboard goes for this specific matchup, we're probably going to see him bring in these Smash to Smithereens, being able to destroy target artifact and deal 3 damage to the controller of that artifact. Since 8-cast runs a ton of artifacts, this is pretty much an auto-include once we are in games 2 and 3. All right, with our players set up, let's go ahead and get this game started. Burn on the play. We're starting with a mountain into the Monastery Swiftspear. 1 damage coming across here. Always a great play to maximize your mana usage. Getting a creature down is going to also maximize the amount of damage that's going to be getting through. So we see the Swiftspear coming in and an Eidolon following it up here. Fred only having that Aether Spellbomb on the first turn there. A good start since that is 2 artifacts already in play. But it's kind of tough now that we're seeing this Eidolon, so that means Fred is probably taking damage, punishing those 0-cast artifacts. We're seeing the Mox Opal taking 2 for that after playing a second Seed of the Synod, and then deciding that the Chalice of the Void on 1 is going to be the best course of action here. That is going to shut down, like I said, those 20 spells. Actually, I think it's going to jump to 28 because of the creatures also being 1/1s. Although it doesn't actually hit Riftbolt, or Skewer the Critics, which both cost 3 CMC. So if he can deal damage, he can still Spectacle. And he can still Suspend here. So we're going to see an Aether Spellbomb bounce the Monastery Swiftspear back to hand, but there's going to be a second Eidolon of the Great Revel coming down here. Emery putting some artifacts into grave. We do see that Grindstone there, kind of giving away Fred's backup plan here that you don't usually see in 8-cast. Mono Red Burn crashing across, Skewer the Critics, dropping him down to 2. Since once you deal damage, it only costs 1 Spectacle, and then we're seeing a Fire Blast, and that's going to catch a Force of Will. So Fred's going to drop down to 1 here. Going to see a Thought Cast. That is CMC 5, so it does not affect the Eidolon. Spire of Industry. Looks like he's casting a Thought Monitor, counting up the number of artifacts in play. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then also using that mana to cast it. And it looks like Fred was going to drop another Emery into play, and the burn player pointed and said, "You're going to take 4 damage for that?" And Fred said, "You know what, let's just go to game 2. So Fred just jumping at the chance, turn 1, Chalice of the Void, using that Lotus Petal, as well as the Island. We see the Spire. Oh, that is an extra card here, Baleful Strix. He told me that he had 2 of these in the deck to kind of hedge his bets against Delver this week. So we see that in play. The Spire, of course, being able to activate for only artifacts. You do have to pay 1 life for it, kind of like a Mana Confluence. Slightly better Mana Confluence, since you can also tap it for colorless if you want to. Seeing an Urza Saga come into play here. Urza Saga, of course, being able to make those constructs and then go ahead and get an artifact of 0 or 1 CMC on the third, what is it, the third lore trigger. We see 2 mana being spent for that Painter's Servant. So now all of the cards in play and in decks are probably blue, I would guess. Although he might not choose that, since the Mono Red Burn player may be running Pyroblasts. He doesn't want to turn on those Pyroblasts. Just an insane rock, paper, scissors, overthinking it, but I doubt it. We see the exact same set of plays for the Mono Red Burn player as last. We see 2 Eidolons in play, dealing 4 damage to anybody who is bold enough to cast a spell for 3 or less. I think he's kind of stuck. Doesn't know if he wants to attack. He could lose both of his Eidolons here, or he would definitely lose one to the Strix, since the Baleful Strix has Death Touch, and then the Painter could just block, so it's not very profitable. And he could make that that Construct, which is happening right now. That Construct being a 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. I don't think it really matters here because this is going to be able to go get Grindstone for 1 CMC. And on activation, the burn player just loses the game if he doesn't burn off the Painter Servant here right now. So we will see. I think it is in Fred's best interest to activate it anyways, just to see if it works. So 2 mountains is going to get a Fire Blast. It's a Force of Negation for the Fire Blast. And he says, anything else? And it looks like he's out of options. It looks like he's got another Fire Blast, but not another mountain. So that's going to be game 2. And we're off to the races in game 3 here. 1 damage in with a Monastery Swift Spear. Another mountain, another Eidolon. These Eidolons just being there when he needs them to. Seeing an Urza Saga for 2, taking 2 damage. A Chalice. Chalice being just as tough, I think, as the Eidolon here, being the Kryptonite to the mono-red burn deck. Let's check the sideboard. So he does run 3 Smash to Smithereens. And speak of the double, there's the Smash. So this is going to destroy target artifact, and Smash deals 3 damage to the artifact's controller. So it's basically another burn spell that is going to also take care of an artifact that is of an annoyance. But really, it's looking like it doesn't really matter to the burn player because he didn't even go for the Chalice. He went for the island. He was trying to put pressure on his blue mana base. So the Rift Bolt goes off, 3 more damage, down to 7. Fred makes a Construct in response. A second Smash is going to deal 4 damage. I think that's just game right here. And we're going to see the Monastery Swift Spear Prowess triggers jump it up to, I think, 3 damage. And that's going to be 5 coming across, and the burn player takes it. Well, that's all we have for this week. I hope you enjoyed those matches. They were pretty quick, but we'll be back with another stream from our Legacy commentary in a couple days here, showing off Jack and Bryson. I think it is a fun one. I think it's Cephalid Breakfast versus Mississippi River. As always, thanks for watching our videos. I hope if this is your first time here that you like and subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date on all of our cool new stuff. Thanks, of course, to Spellhold Games for allowing us to record in their store. And if you're interested in seeing those visual deck lists from earlier, that is up on our Instagram page at Tuesday Night Legacy. And if you just want to have a link to the deck list, they're always in the description of these videos right below this video. So until then, I've been Eugene, and this is Tuesday Night Legacy. We'll see you next time.